It takes a lot of nerve to do this. Think how many things can go wrong. I mean, the stakes are high. I'm comfortable pulling it off, but this isn't without risk. Then you overlay a once-in-a-century pandemic and then the social unrest arising out of the George Floyd murder, and we are in completely uncharted territory.
We've done the first round, we've done the regional finals, and we've done Final Fours, but never, and no one has ever done the entire tournament in one city.
That clock just keeps ticking, and there are a lot of decisions that need to be made.
Who's picking up the refs? Who's hosting this team? What if they lose? How do they fly?
It's great that we have the connected hotels, the convention center, but it's also our healthcare providers.
Our first question was, can we do it? Can we do it safely? We had to do some math. But ultimately we got to yes. There was a sense of, in President Emmert's words, can't fail. That lent a sense of gravity to the work that we were getting ready to undertake.
Before March 2020, we were expecting to have one of the biggest years in Indianapolis history.
COVID really was like hitting a cement wall. The industry was destroyed, if you would, for a lot of people.
155,000 people would work downtown, and that number plummeted down to 20%, at a best case scenario.
We were already started planning for the Big Ten tournament, and then conference tournament started dropping.
All the ADs were meeting in a very small, confined room in Bankers Life Fieldhouse, which we didn't think twice about, eating pretzels from a common bowl and talking about how the show must go on, and here we go,
And then they canceled the whole tournament and the rest of the season.
I think when it all happened, we were all sort of in a state of semi-amazement or shock, or like, is this really happening?
It was awful. I mean, I had to sit here and look in their eyes and say, you're done.
The NCAA made the decision late fall, early winter, that if they were going to have their tournament, they were going to have to do it at a single site.
It was around November time period that the men's basketball committee and staff determined, after a lot of consideration, that having the tournament in 14 different locations around the country would not be feasible in this pandemic, and that we needed to have the tournament played in one location.
And then we started hearing the rumblings that there could potentially be a significant opportunity to bring not just and keep the Final Four, but bring the entire tournament here.
Indianapolis was the preferred location because that's where the Final Four is going to be held. But there were an awful lot of details to work through to see if it would be feasible to do so. It's one thing to host 3 games, it's quite different to host 67 games and 68 teams.
You think about November and December, when we're in the thick of the pandemic surge. And so we all were scratching our heads, and yet the NCAA announced San Antonio for the women. And we're like, okay, they like this bubble mentality.
So we took the entire month of December and into early January to finalize those details, and then announced, I think just after the first of the year, I believe January 1st, that the entire tournament would indeed be held in Indy.
That was certainly a great moment that I knew, while very challenging and that everyone understood we had a lot of work ahead of us. It is an exciting time for our city.
It's just fitting that this was the year we were supposed to host the Final Four. The NCAA's in our backyard. We have these amazing venues that are well connected, staffed with incredible event professionals, and it's our sport.
Basketball, we often say, might have been born elsewhere, but it grew up in Indiana.
It's the almost religious-like reverence people have for the sport, for the games, for the tournaments, the events, our great players, our great coaches, our great teams. Hoosier hysteria is real in Indiana.
The history here is long and deep. Great coaches, great players, John Wooden, Larry Bird, you name it, Oscar Robertson, dozens and hundreds and thousands of others. So it is a special place for basketball. There are other places in the country, but I think folks around here would argue that it's more important here than anywhere.
We had all of about 3 or maybe 3.5 months to plan for this.
I'm comfortable pulling off, but this isn't without risk. Then you overlay a once-in-a-century pandemic, and then the social unrest arising out of the George Floyd murder, and we are in completely uncharted territory.
Weekdays turn into weekends. There's not much differentiation, but that's it's a little early March madness.
That clock just keeps ticking, and there are a lot of decisions that need to be made that, frankly, you have to make with less information than you would normally make.
It's a very heavy lift for our staff. Our folks are working really hard to be prepared and to meet all the requirements and the protocols that the NCAA has asked of all the sites.
Years and years ago, the leaders on whose shoulders we all stand now as civic organizations made a decision. Let's demonstrate that we can create a downtown that knows how to put on big events and that can build the infrastructure around them with hotels and restaurants, attractions, transportation, sidewalk cleanliness, signage and energy, all of that, and say, whenever it's ready, we'll be ready.
Downtown over the last year has almost been like a ghost town. It's not like what it normally is. A lot of people are working from home, and we don't get the same business as far as like on the normal day-to-day.
When that spigot gets turned off, no events, no games, no trade shows, no office workers, it's devastating.
So it became very clear in the fall that those restaurants were not going to survive collectively until we started seeing those numbers return.
Financially, it has been very difficult for any owners of the hotels here in Indianapolis and around the country. And so it was really trying to figure out when could we bring people back.
I look at my phone and I see my front desk manager and our assistant GM calling, and I was like, yes, I knew that they were calling me back to work. And as soon as I heard their voice, I almost jumped out of my car, out of my seatbelt.
When the office workers start coming back, the trade shows start coming back, the conferences start coming back, the games start coming back, and I think people are thirsting for that. The gods shine down on us and give us this tournament, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that I think will be a springboard for Indianapolis coming back.
We have a lot of safety procedures here in the hotel that we follow, so I feel safe. So I think this is just the beginning of going back to normal.
In my way of thinking, it's a win-win-win for the city of Indianapolis, and we just have to do everything we can to make sure that it is pulled off as safely and as successfully as we can have it.
Everybody from athletic directors, college presidents, the NCAA, all of our hospitality community, safety is number one. And keeping our athletes and coaches and officials safe.
Long before the NCAA had the idea of doing this entire tournament here in one location, the Indy Sports Corporation was already thinking about, well, how can Indianapolis emulate what had occurred in Florida with the NBA and the WNBA, where the bubble was created successfully, and to their credit, the Indiana Sports Corporation said, why can't we do that here in Indianapolis?
Hotels are self-contained, so teams have their own floor. No guests that aren't part of this effort are staying in these hotels. Teams will eat there. They literally walk across, one of the connectors to the convention center to play, or they hop in a secured van and drive to the venue to play or practice. And so they've done a great job building environmental security, and they also have a very robust testing scheme. People need to pass a certain amount of tests before they're allowed in the bubble. Once they're in, they're part of this testing regime. And so, yeah, and they're thoughtful about everything. Team movements, how close people are, where they eat. They've really gone above and beyond to create a safe environment.
Yeah, so we sit now in a molecular diagnostic laboratory in IU Health's pathology lab. This is the laboratory that will perform all of the COVID-19 testing during the tournament. Yeah, our estimates for total testing over the course of this from start to finish is about 30,000 COVID-19 tests will be administered. But what happens when you get a positive result? And there are at least two really important things that happen immediately. The first is, are we sure that that first test was positive? So we'll notify the NCAA of the positive or the suspected positive result, and then immediately that player or that individual will be placed in isolation. pending the final results of these subsequent 2 tests. And then if and as necessary, of course, we'll do a full contact trace, which is there's a piece of technology that's going to help with that.
Once the pandemic happened, we really decided to listen to some of the customers that we were working with, and the challenge was accurate contact tracing. One of the first sports clients in the US was the NBA. They used it in the bubble, and then a lot of other leagues started to look at it and say, this really works. It's a very small and lightweight technology. It is about the size of a domino or an Apple AirPods case, so the student athletes or players really don't notice having it on them. What the sensors do is they measure the distance and duration of contacts between users. Being able to look at the data, isolate those people who are at high risk, and then allow the rest of the team to continue playing and ultimately continue to be safe and compete for a championship.
It's weird because in one sense you're a team, and the great thing about being a team is being together. But in this instance, you need to be mentally together and physically apart.
We've asked a lot of our players, our coaches, our entire staff over this last, almost a year now, in terms of giving up those opportunities to really interact regularly and closely with people that matter to them. But I think they also recognize that, hey, this game and the opportunity to play this game at the level they're able to play at means a lot to them personally.
It's a hard thing for them to battle through. It's been taxing mentally. You've seen college athletes talk about that. And so we want them to remember when someone says Indianapolis, we want the first thing to come back to their mind would be the time they competed in the tournament during the pandemic and how great it felt under the circumstances.
The cancellation last year, that was just so painful and such an empty feeling for those student athletes and coaches and teams that weren't able to participate. So anything that we can do above and beyond to make sure that happens this year successfully is a motivating factor and has been, now for coming up on a year.
I think this is the granddaddy of them all, just by the sheer size. Are you kidding me? This was supposed to be at 14 regional places around the country. It's going to be in a handful right here in central Indiana.
But now we're going to have these artists and celebrations and gatherings and artist presentations and windows throughout downtown, and that energy of where sports meets arts, meets performance, meets kind of civic connections, all of that will be for not just the fans who are coming here with their teams, but our locals. These big events in this downtown, it's our mountain range, it's our seashore, it's our draw, and it generates the revenue that sustains our community for many, many months.
I can tell you, as the mayor of our city, that sigh of relief moment will be when the tournament is completed, when it has been deemed successful, when it has been conducted as safely as it can possibly be, and that the city of Indianapolis has been able to show the world that we are a city that's capable of doing anything that we set our minds to, even something as audacious as this.
Right up until that moment, you're working hard to make sure that everything is just right. But when that ball goes up, then you take a little bit of a sigh of relief and say, oh, we did it. We're here, let's play. Let's enjoy the games now and let these players do what they're best at.
Is sports necessary? Is it going to is it going to save lives? And sometimes I have to answer, yeah, it is, because it's a great unifier. It's what is the psyche that connects us all. Whether from a CEO to a custodian, there's high fives going on when your team wins. And Indianapolis gets this. We are going to deliver. We'll do this time and time again, and it's who we are. It's our DNA.